There you go. Stupid software. Uh, Welcome, everybody. Sorry for the little technical glitch there. Welcome to the show. Outcode 66. Todd Mariana. Today we're gonna go over not only how to clean up and assess and I don't know how you want to put it, restore, recharge, recondition the horseshoe magnets that are in there. But before I do that, we're actually going to have a quick discussion on magnetism in general, on how the magnets in the Cutterhead will work, well, I guess really we'll start with how bar magnets work, and then horseshoes, and then how things work inside the Cutterhead when you start to put all this stuff together with pole pieces and the coils, and how all that causes the armature to actually move. So hopefully we can get to all of that real quick, and then after we go through that stuff, which I'll be using the paper and a Sharpie to kind of draw some things out, then I'll go through how I do the work on the magnets, and I'll demonstrate a little bit of the charging. I'm not going to actually fully do it in this video. I'm just going to show you how to do it. And then also too, before all of that, I'm going to play you guys a pre-recorded video that is all of the 1D parts after I finished polishing them up. So I have pictures of that, and I'll show you those. Things came out really nice. As you saw in the intro card, music written by myself, and in this case, Brian Gardner. Sometimes also you'll hear stuff that was me and Chris Grabowski, K-Rad. Check out their stuff. I'll put links in the description in this video when it goes on YouTube. Please check out my YouTube channel. There's tons of stuff there. And I also too, I now have a playlist that I created that has all of these mono Cutterhead restoration videos. So I'll have this whole series easily accessible in a playlist on my channel. Please check those out, and please do subscribe to me. That really will help. As I've said many times now, if I can get my channel to monetization, I will start showing you guys some really neat stuff, not just this sort of entry-level mono Cutterhead stuff. I can show you more of my real work if it is worth my while to do. So help me help you, help me to help you, to help me to help you. Anyway, I think yeah, we'll just pretty much jump right into the pre-recorded stuff here. So I'm going to turn the music down a little bit. And if anybody is joining, thank you. If you're watching this after the fact, thank you. I appreciate everyone's interest in what I do, in my work, and in definitely anybody that supports what I'm doing. And what I mean by that is even just commenting, definitely subscribing. If you want to send a very small contribution via PayPal, you could totally do that as well. But at the very least, just your interest in what I'm doing is appreciated enough. So thank you for that. And yeah, let's jump into some of the pre-recorded stuff here. So Presto 1D. This is the same one that I just worked on last night and streamed. I did like the cover and the armature and one of the pole pieces, a couple screws. So you can see everything come out really, really nice. You do notice right now in the V slot of the armature, that's sort of the center of the screen, there is a line, and one would think, oh, that's probably, you didn't quite get in there well enough. Well, yes and no. Some of that's just going to be impossible to remove, but also too, some of that is wear because it sits against the knife edge and it pivots. And after years of doing that, you're going to have some of the bottom of that V track missing. So in some senses, you know, that's a problem right there. If I can't make a new armature for somebody, which really right now, realistically, that would cost a lot of money. That right there, either the knife edge or that that V slot being worn out, will also cause distortion in the signal that it traces, because it's no longer a nice pivot. It's got some sort of play to it in there now if it's rounded out, right? Either the knife edge is rounded or dulled, I should say, or the bottom of that V slot is no longer sort of a 90-degree right angle and is now rounded, you know. So that's something that could be overlooked. It's not something that, again, like I said, that you could really easily fix unless you have the capacity to make brand new armatures, and that's not really an easy part to make. So that being said, that's probably not something that you're going to be able to really do a lot about per se, but it is, you know, it's definitely something that, again, that is problematic in these heads usually, that ages. Now the springs, on the other hand, are something that, you know, you can more easily clone, and those also, once they start to wear in, will definitely cause problems, cause inaccuracies in the tracing of the electrical waveform. So really quick to start here, let's move my Zoid. I actually got that when I was a child, and built it. And my Tom Servo, who I love dearly. Hi everybody, Tom Servo. I'm gonna roll around this way so I can be same direction as you guys. This is not the magnet from my client's head. This is one of mine. I just pulled it out because I'm going to be using it to demonstrate with, and I'm not going to have it on a keeper or reminder like that, right? And I don't want to really do that with my client's magnet. So in order to avoid that, I'm using my own. One thing to first mention about these guys is that, let me try to get the light better. Yeah, so one thing to kind of mention about these is it's almost like the same sort of treatment that is on a firearm, you know, that's called bluing. I've seen these in various states. So some people have painted them, and not just this style, the ones that are in the Presto 1Ds and 1Cs. Some of them have been recoded by people over the years, so you'll see all sorts of stuff. Point of the matter is, this stuff can come off with certain chemicals. You can, you can take this finish off. So to avoid doing that, I would suggest not using something that is going to be abrasive, corrosive. Sometimes just a little soap and water, that works. Top bright versus Brasso, because top bright's going to be easier on paint finishes than Brasso will. That Brasso stuff that I was using, don't use that on these magnets, because it will definitely take the finish off. So don't use that stuff. Use that top right stuff here. I'm trying to roll over and grab it and see if I can not knock my drink over. Hold on. So don't use this, because this stuff is pretty aggressive on paints. Not like a polyurethane coating, but on some paints. And this stuff is not so much. So this stuff would be better. But just a mild soap and water also can work, or just water, or just a clean rag. So be careful with this style. Definitely. But with these, the Prestos, almost always you can sort of see in the light that these come with sort of a clear coat on them. So it's not as critical. You don't have to be as careful with these usually with respect to polishing them, but definitely this style. And you'll see these in other heads, like some RCAs and stuff like that. So, man, let me try to be quick in this video because I don't want to go on forever like I did last night. So, how do magnets work, right? What's going on inside there? I'm going to turn this a little bit. So yeah, don't use the Presto on the black ones. Be careful with those. Whoops, I'm gonna do that a million times. Okay, cool. So audio is an AC waveform, right? And what I mean by that is it's something like this. You know, going this way is a negative, going this way is a positive, okay? And just to make one cycle here, right? It's gonna look something like that. So your basic sine wave, one cycle of that, going positive, going to zero, going negative, going to zero. This is, you know, what audio is essentially. So when you run that audio through Cutterhead, it turns it into motion of the stylus, right? More specifically, motion of the armature that the stylus is embedded in or held by. And so you can think of this, you know, as movement in the groove. Since it's not stereo, there's no vertical in mono. So if you can think of a groove with no audio, it's going to be sort of, you know, this kind of an affair, right? That's the bottom of the groove. These are the groove walls, right? It looks like that. No audio, right? If you have audio, it's going to look like this. Now, forgive me, you know, not an artist, right? But you get the idea. This sort of will represent this. Well, how do you get that in the head? Well, you have to force movement of that armature, right? So the armature is on a pivot, and I'm just going to make that as a point. And you know, the armature holds the stylus, so that's the stylus, right? And that stylus is going to wiggle, right, back and forth, right? So it's going to go one way, or it's going to go the other way. And as it goes that way or that way, it's going to trace this sort of a thing in the groove. So how do we get that to happen, right? Well, here's how a magnet works. Regular bar magnet, something like this, going to have a south and a north pole, right? And so if you were to sprinkle a bunch of iron filings on this, you could see the flux lines, and they're going to be like this, right? So they're going to come out, come back in. Right? Draw a bunch more in your head. But that's basically the deal. You've got this sort of arcing lines that come out from each of the sides. And if you were to measure this guy, it's going to measure the strongest right at the edges here, right? So this edge, this edge. My dog is complaining. Those are where this thing's going to measure the strongest, right? So if you take this arrangement and you now form it into a horseshoe, right, you're going to have this sort of a thing. So a horseshoe magnet, right? And one side is going to be north, the other side is going to be south, right? And now those lines are still going to radiate out like in that same sort of a pattern, in that same sort of arcing pattern. But the caveat here is that because this has now come closer to this, you're going to manipulate the field. So it's no longer going to be this simple, straight line from north to south exactly, you're going to get this sort of a thing, right? So you're going to have a line that will come out like it normally does, but then bow in, and then come out and bow in. Same thing, right? Now, as it comes over, you will still have this wraparound effect. So this isn't going to be entirely right. But the point I'm trying to make is if you change the geometry of the magnet, you're changing the geometry of the field. And though I'm drawing this two-dimensionally, you can actually change it three-dimensionally, right? So Cutterheads, the coils are not flat, like they have dimensionality to them, and how they interact with the armature also is not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. So you got to think about this as not just a 2D thing. Other point that I'm trying to make is that as these lines come closer in, they become more or less a straight sort of an affair, right? And so, though I didn't really draw these very straight, sorry. Imagine those as being relatively straight across. And that's the key, is having this sort of straight-lined flux density is what that's referred to. And so that's why you're going to use a horseshoe magnet, is because that's the way to distort the field in a way, the magnetic field in a way that you're getting like this sort of gap that's saturated, right? Okay. So now, really quickly, let's explain like how this all works inside of Presto. 1C or 1D, doesn't matter. They're both the same. Yeah, so you got your horseshoe magnet, right? And so that's going to have the flux density going across inside of there. And that, in the middle of it, is where the armature is sitting, right? But not just the armature, there's more stuff. So beneath these are where the pole pieces are. And the pole pieces essentially are serving this thing, a function that I refer to as a flux core, right? So they're channeling, directing, concentrating, not only the flux of the magnet, but the flux of the coils. And so I'm going to keep this drawing simple, but essentially how this is arranged is those pole pieces are underneath, the ends, the actual poles, right? So here, and I'm just going to draw a simple representation of the coils. So there you go. And so you've got magnetic lines this way, and then also radiating out, right? Radiating out from each one of the coils. Right? So basically what you're doing is you're creating a little box. So I'm going to make this a little bit simpler now. So right? This is the south of the magnet. This is the north of the magnet, right? And so south, north, right? And then the coils themselves, the way that a coil works is if you run electricity through it one way, you'll get a field north-south orientation. And if you run electricity the other way, you'll get the flipped north-south, right? So if I was to have two coils that had their windings going in the same way, so the start hole, the enameled wire that goes into the coil that starts it, okay? And the other one, if I had the hole and the start, the enamel wire, right, for both of those coils on the same, or oriented the same, then the fields would be the same. And so let's say this one's north and south, then it would be north and south. And so what you would have are opposing fields, right there. And that's not how it is. So how it actually is the holes are facing opposite directions. So you have one coil here, one coil here, the start and the start. And that's how it is. And so in this arrangement, if it's north and south, then it's going to be north and south. And so now you've got south and south on the same sides. And this is with electricity going one way. If the current were going the other way, then you would flip that, right? And it would be norths in the middle. The point I'm trying to make, though, is let's complete this diagram up here. So this is the permanent magnet, the horseshoe, right? And then these are the coils, right? So the coils are right there. So we can imagine this as a little box, right? And so, north to south, right? Got flux lines. And then if we're charging these coils in the fashion that I just described, then at some point in time, and I'm just going to, again, to follow this example, in one current direction, you're going to have north and south, south and north. And so what that looks like to me is a lot of S's inside of this area, right? So inside of this area, right, and I'll put north and north there too. If we run current one way, we get a lot of S's. If we run it in the opposite direction, we get a lot of norths. And if we don't run any, then we just get the magnet and no accentuation of either pole of the magnet. And that's what's going on. So the coils inside of the Presto heads are essentially causing an imbalance, an accentuation of one of the poles of that magnet. So the flux density here is going to be really strong in one direction or another, essentially. And the pole pieces are there to concentrate that effect around the actual armature piece. Because as I've sort of mentioned before, magnetism drops off really quickly with distance. And so if you can't take this beautiful little system, this box system, if you will, again, sort of, this is a box. And it's north and south from the magnet. But these coils, because they've got their hole that goes in where you start winding in opposite directions, when you charge them, the effects are going to be inverted, right? And so, like I just described. And so this creates essentially like south, south, and south, and one north from here. And so, again, if you can concentrate, focus all that, and that's what the pole pieces are doing, and really minimizing that gap between north and south poles and the armature itself, then you're going to have the greatest, most efficient effect on that armature. If you don't have the pole pieces there, this will still work. It will just not work very well, and it will be you'd have very low volume cuts because you wouldn't have a lot of force, right? You'd have very small excursion to your grooves. So in order to get more excursion and more force, you concentrate that flux and you bring it closer to the thing that you want it to move. And again, I just explained this before too. Guitar pickup is almost exactly the same sort of a concept, but in reverse. Instead of causing something to move with magnetic field, you're able to see something that is steel moving, because that steel is, as it's moving in a field, is having currents induced within it and creating its own field in opposition to the field that is coming from the pickups. And the pickups have pieces of iron in them that help to, which are their flux core, by the way. That's what those little dots are on the fret, on the pickups. And those are what are helping to concentrate or to pick up the effect of the string vibrating, better. So essentially, instead of causing something iron to move, you're detecting something iron moving via an electromagnetic system. there you go. Sort of the inverse of all of this. And also do, as I've described, very early electrical pickups look almost identical to this sort of thing. They are just like Cutterheads. They just are made to do the inverse, and so their values on things, you know, are different, but the exact like physical arrangement was pretty much exactly the same as this. And so that's all this. That's essentially how, you know, the Presto system works. In addition to all that, you know, other things to note are, it's got, like I've also mentioned, the complex armature arrangement with the springs that not only put tension, you know, or create tension, I should say, but that tension system in any head does essentially three things. It centers the stylus when there's unmodulated grooves, when there's only zero, when we only have a signal that is zero, right? No plus, no minus. So that means no extension of the magnetic fields one way or the other, which means accentuation, which means, you know, no movement of the stylus. But if you were to be cutting without holding it rigidly, then the material itself is going to cause some vibrations, right? So the tension mechanism in a cutter head not only brings that stylus to zero when there's no, when the signal value is zero, but it also minimizes background noise in the cut because it is holding the stylus rigidly and not allowing the material that it's cutting through to cause it to wiggle, right? Trying to think, is there another thing that, oh yes, and then the third thing that that it does is something similar to the damper, right? It will allow high frequencies to not get rolled over, as I put it, by the momentum of low frequencies. Low frequencies are easy to achieve in a transducer. High frequencies are not. But if you have a tight spring system, your high frequencies will be able to be represented easier. And like I said, will not sort of be washed over by low frequencies. And, you know, like the physics of the thing that's actually moving. So you use tension for that. You also use a damper for that purpose, both together. So the tension, the springs, are really for three things, right? Centering, reducing background noise in unmodulated grooves, and helping your highs to not be covered up essentially by low frequencies. So what is this? You can get this off of eBay. You can get similar things to this. You don't have to get this one exactly, but this one is nice because it does both AC and DC, not just DC. So I can measure a magnet like this, but I can also measure a coil that has an AC waveform signal exciting it and is generating, you know, a field that is fluctuating. The poles are inverting in that field. Unlike this one where the field is fixed, you know, there's a north and a south, and that won't change. And if you try to change it, you will screw it up forever. So, a couple things you need to actually restore a magnet is identification, right? Assessment. One thing is a meter like this. This is what's referred to as a Gauss meter. G-A-U, Gauss meter. G-A-U-S-S. And I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. So you put that aside. You also need, now the Gauss meter will show you north and south, but only if you hold the probe correctly. And so if you don't hold it the right way, it will lie to you. So it's always nice to have something like this, which is a fixed pole magnet, but it's actually marked, you know, identified. Because again, if you put this onto the magnet recharger the wrong way, you will ruin that magnet. So don't do that. The other things that will ruin a magnet are if you are to expose it to a lot of vibration, heavy vibration. So one way that you can demagnetize a piece of steel if you don't want it to be magnetized, like a screwdriver or something like that, you know, you can run it through a demagnetizer. You can also take, and this is one of the other things that you would need to do this work, a brass hammer. And I don't like big ones. So I like this one because it's small and it's just a brass attachment. And so why would you use a brass hammer? You can't use the steel hammer. If you try to tap a magnet with a steel hammer, yeah, guess what's going to happen? The magnet or the hammer or both are going to want to come together. And so your nice blow will be like retarded by that attraction. That force will not allow you to strike it correctly. It will jump at the hammer before you're finishing the blow. And so unless you have it like viced or something, but then if you had it viced and you're hitting it with a hammer, you're definitely going to run the risk of cracking it and fracturing it, either microfracturing it internally, which you might not be able to see, or actually breaking it in half, or breaking a tip off or something. Don't do that. So in order to tap something that has become magnetized that you don't want magnetized, you can use a brass hammer. And if you tap it enough, it will, what it does is it causes basically, if you can imagine inside of here, there are, ferrous steel molecules, right, inside of a crystal lattice, which is the metal. And they can have a magnetic orientation, north or south. And that is, sort of, in this case, I'm going to just do the two-dimensional explanation, right? So this way or this way, right? So in a magnet, it's been forced to have all of those fields aligned, right? So it's not like it's sort of 50-50. In a normal piece of steel, as I've explained before, it is sort of a random distribution three-dimensionally of the fields. And a normal piece of steel is not, doesn't have a doesn't have an orientation one way or the other. Here you have used a device to force an orientation, through using a lot of energy usually, to make those poles in this piece of metal align. And certain metals, or metal amalgams, I should say, but also metals like rare earth metals, are better at allowing that to occur, that alignment to occur. So like alnico magnets, those are pressed powder actually. So underneath the coating is what looks like metal, but it's actually been pressed. It was powder, and it forms a solid, and then they're magnetized. Point I'm making is that particular combination of metals are better than just the off-the-shelf ferrite type old school horseshoe magnet. They were more powerful because of that reason. Same with rare earth neodymiums. They are, again, a different type of a metal amalgam combination that just allows for the alignment of the fields better, so they become a stronger magnet. If you want to destroy a magnet, like I was saying, you could tap the heck out of it and you can destroy it. So don't do that. That is not what I'm suggesting to do. But that's what brass hammers are typically for, is to demagnetize something. So I'll explain why I use this in a minute. So let's get some stuff going here. This guy just, oops, crap. Comes with this thing that is going to fall apart and hopefully is actually going to work with me tonight. So this is what I'm saying. One side is marked, one side is not. If you hold it one way, you'll get a north-south reading. You hold it the other way, you get a south-north reading, right? So that's why it's kind of handy. Let me see if I can do this. fall a million times. So right now that says south and it says 0.01. So let me, oops, that's what I'm talking about. My probe leads are a little wonky, so I need to replace that. So as I discussed earlier, the strongest reading is going to be on the edge of a magnet, right? So right now, just off the bat, I'm going to take this and I'm going to say which side is north and which side is south. Okay, well, that's south, the blue. So south is attracted to this side. That means this side is north. Right? You could take a magic marker at this point after you've identified north. If you want to, it doesn't really matter. You know, dot it so you know which side is which. So that's my north. So you're going to get the strongest readings at the edges. Yeah. And what you're really concerned with are really the edges that are going to be filling the gap, right? So reading, and this, my particular one, as you can see, has sort of this black piece and then a green piece. And so there's a little edge there. And I use that edge to actually follow the edge of the magnet. Oops. There we go. When it goes up to 500, I know it's giving me false readings. And so you can kind of run it across. Say, all right, what's my strongest reading here? Oop, I see a 90. I saw a 94. And as I get to the middle, like I was saying, that's really kind of where we're concerned with. And that's usually where you're going to see like the juiciest amounts. So 94, I did see 96 for a second. Around 90s or 100, that's good, right? That's pretty good for these magnets, for this style of magnet. Neodymiums will start reading in the hundreds almost immediately. Oh, 95. So this one actually is pretty good, right? So, and again, I was reading along this edge and along this edge, and this edge. Don't really care so much about the outside. And around 100 is pretty good. You know, the other thing about this magnet is that it read the same on both sides. You won't see that typically. Like for instance, I think this one is off. Right? So I will actually read it without that going on real quick. So parts of it are 80, but not really towards, oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm seeing 80s. So I think we can definitely make this one stronger. And about the same amounts on the same places. So that's good. Again, this one is balanced. Grab this guy real quick. So this is my actual client's head, and it is getting to the 90s towards the inside, I saw right there, and then it's close, but it wasn't quite 90. So this one is imbalanced, right? Oops, I did see for a second. It's not reading that as, yeah, in the same places. It's not reading 90 in the same places. So this does have an imbalance. It's skewed one way, right? And that's a problem for sure. The other one, I think I can add a little bit so we can get it from 80s to, you know, definitely high 90s or 100. The one that I have personally, this one's fine. I'm not going to do anything with it, especially because I'm not rebuilding that head anytime soon. But this one, I will definitely be, I'm going to recharge this one and the other one. But this one, I'm going to be mindful of the fact that it is imbalanced. And so I will be recharging it, but focusing on one side or the other. And now I know which side, right? So that's how you would actually assess a magnet, is to measure it. And you have to have something like this in order to actually quantitatively measure it. If you were to just sit here and try to like say, oh, does this thing stick on this side as much as it sticks on the, you can't tell by hand. So you need something to actually measure the field. The other thing is you need something to know orientation easily, because unless you're holding the probe correctly, which you're not always going to do, that readout, the digital readout, will not really be representing reality. So this is the final thing. After I determine, yes, clean up a magnet first, and then determine, yes, it needs work, no, it doesn't, I will actually go ahead and recondition it. You need something that is like this, which is a magnetizer. It's got capacitors and power supply on the inside and big old coils, and so once you plug it in and turn it on, if you hit this button, it's an instantaneous thing. It's like a flash strobe. So holding it down doesn't do anything. It's only functional right when you press the button. There's an immediate boom, and that's the discharge of the capacitors. And once you've switched to line voltage, it doesn't have enough it doesn't have enough amps to actually do anything. So it's the capacitors that charge in this thing that are really charging the coils enough to have a strong enough field to actually try to, align poles in a magnet. And I'm not going to use this guy, but I'll use this guy. So these things, these come with these two shiny rods, not with the pieces I've attached. So the two shiny rods are going to allow you to complete the magnetic circuit. Unless you're charging a magnet that's big enough to actually go in these holes, which all the Cutterhead magnets are not going to be really. There's no way that you're going to be able to like get this guy, darn it, into those holes. So instead of that, you put, something along the lines of a pole piece, a big piece of steel that will channel the flux that's being created by the coils. The coils are wrapped around these two holes on the inside of this guy. So again, this is, you can get something like this on eBay. They're not that expensive. And you can also open them up. Again, for safety purposes, do not do this unless you're an electrical engineer and you know what you're doing. But you can beef these things up. You can open them up and you can change out components, and you can beef them up. You can also make your own. So that's what I ended up doing, was just graduating to making my own instead of trying to coerce something off the shelf that's not made to recharge these types of small magnets, right? So, like I said, the ones we have are smaller, so to get, a better, to actually physically complete the circuit with your magnet, you can do something like this, which is put, some pieces across that will help to fill that gap. And so as long as it's sitting on there and sitting on, touching, right, and not just touching, but touching correctly. So as you can see, I put north on north, and I marked the actual pole pieces, flux cores, whatever. So you can see right here, it says north and south, and that's very important. Don't put it in backwards. If you do, not only will your magnet like jump off of here, because opposites, or excuse me, it will jump off because the field will be inverse. And so right now, if you turn this on and press the button, and you had this thing sitting like this, it'll want to be attracted like that. So when it's on, when it's on and you've got it oriented correctly, you will have an attractive force. If you turn this on and you have it oriented incorrectly, you'll have a repelling force and it will jump off unless you're holding it. So, and it will also ruin the magnet. So that's why before I was saying you want to identify north and south and mark north and make sure when you're actually going to recharge it to orient that correctly. Do not put it in backwards and power it because you'll ruin your magnet. So touching, north to north, turn it on, bonk, and that's it. If you bonk and then hold it down, it's doing nothing. Right? So just bonk, and you'll actually feel it, you'll hear it, it'll cause the magnet to sort of thunk, right? If you're curious, that's just paper towel in there. It's just stuffing that in to hold these guys rigidly in those very large holes because otherwise they'll flop around. So this is the final thing, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. The final thing is the brass hammer. So as I explained before, if you tap something that's magnetized enough, you'll demagnetize it. And why is that? Because you're adding energy to the metallic crystal lattice system, and that energy is helping to, cause entropy in that system. And that entropy is affecting the pole alignments, right? So you're scattering. If you're tapping it, you're adding energy, which, like I said, adds entropy to the pole alignments, and you're scattering those poles. Or, and this is the big or, and you really won't find this documented anywhere. You'll always read about demagnetizing. If you have a magnet that's just not taking a charge, like you've done it a few times. Oh yeah, and not just like this, but like you turn it and maybe maybe come this way, come this way, charge it a few times, right? Try hitting it a few times and measure it as you're hitting it. Take it off, measure it, see, okay, am I adding? Am I making it worse? Am I causing an imbalance? Am I fixing an imbalance? If you have an imbalance that just will not fix, or a magnet that just will not take additional charge on both sides, not just one, that's when you bring this into play. So only use this in the last case scenarios when a magnet either will not take a charge with this type of cheap machine. Now, if you had something like my supercharged one, or if you have like a real commercial one, this doesn't, no need for this at all, because the fields that those things can generate are so intense that this is not needed. But you're using something that's off the shelf, that is not as intense, then sometimes you have to give it a little kick in the butt, and that's basically what this is. So if I just tap it like this, I'm gonna disorient the fields. But if I'm tapping it at the exact same moment as I blast it with this thing, then I'm adding energy to the system in two ways. I'm freeing up I'm sort of freeing up that field, if you will, those poles, and then I'm zapping it so as they're sort of loose, then I fix it in a particular orientation using the magnetic field this thing generates. So again, you can destroy magnet with it, or if you have your timing, and this does take really good timing, if you have your timing right, you can actually help this thing. You can accentuate its effect by tapping it again at the exact same moment. So this thing has travel to it, and it only the switch is only activated at the very bottom. So I know the feel of the spring. So 1, 2, 3, bump. 1, 2, 3, bump. 1, 2, 3, bump. Let's say that this side is the stuck one, right? And again, I would have this held better, maybe taped or something like that. But this is sort of the thing, right? You sort of practice, okay, 1, 2, 3, boom. 1, 2, 3, boom. 1, 2, 3, boom. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you're seeing that 3. And right when I come down on 3, the second I'm hitting, I'm at the bottom of the travel. So I'm a lot better at doing that when I'm not doing it on camera, number one. Number two, this is a magnet I don't care about, so I don't care if I pound on it for this demo. Number 3, I could still fix it even with what I've done right now. If I screwed it up, I could totally fix it. This one's not mucked up yet. But if I was to use a larger, more heavy hammer, it's easier to, muck it up, make this process more of a negative than a positive. It's also easier to crack or break your magnets. So use a small brass hammer. Drummers will have an easy time at this, but sort of practice your timing and do what I did, which is sort of the ready, steady, go, right? 1, 2, 3. And even while you're doing that, you can sort of mimic that motion with this button, this finger, right? 1, 2, boom. 1, 2, boom. And that's the trick. Don't hit it real hard. Just tapping it. And that tap is just, if it's timed correctly, will enable this guy to more efficiently align the poles. And that's the secret. I have taken magnets that read something like 40 or 50 and gotten them up to 100 on each side from old Presto heads doing this and being very careful about it. So, with that, I will conclude today's stream. Thank you very much for checking out my work. Please, definitely do keep watching these streams, because I will be, as I said, finishing the restoration here. So I'll be, the next steps on this stuff after I charge these magnets will be to make the dampers and the coils. So I'll show you the coils, and then after that, I will be actually doing the construction on them and bench testing them. So I'll show you guys that too. And I'll be explaining more in those videos. And then again, these are all in a playlist on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. So please check that out. Please subscribe to me there. As usual, if you like my work, like my videos. If you don't like my work, please feel free to dislike them, or me. Totally cool with that. Comments are really nice. So please comment, please ask questions. I answer almost all. Again, please subscribe. Be well. Take care of yourselves, and definitely be kind to others. And I will see you all next time. Namaskar.